Jan Logie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes. I'd like to speak specifically about Section 264A, the Workplace Injury Prevention Action Plan, in reference to a recommendation that is made at the beginning of the report in relation to domestic violence. And while we have been expressing disappointment all the way through this debate, sadly, on this point I would like to express some hope and gratitude for the clarification and the fact that it is set down in writing in this legislation that domestic violence is a workplace hazard in this country. And I expect that the Workplace Injury Prevention Action Plan, as referenced in 264A, will take that into account, and that hopefully we will see action by ACC and support through ACC-funded activities for a rollout across the country of support for businesses to develop appropriate policies to enable the workplaces to put systems in place to ensure that domestic violence is not acting as a hazard in the workplace. Because we know that in New Zealand, there was a survey done in 1996 that found that of New Zealand women, safety survey, that found 17% of study participants had experienced stalking by their ex-partner outside of their workplace. We know that women are most likely to be killed 6 months after leaving, and the Family Violence Deaths Review Committee have said informally that many of the people that they have spoken with, they don't have the power to go in to workplaces and investigate after a death, but they've found out informally that many people, the only people that knew were their workmates. And here we had a survey where 17% of women were stalked by ex-partners out of a survey. So that is a very large problem, and it is impacting on productivity in this country as well as safety. There was research done by Suzanne Snively, commissioned by the PSA, that found that on a very conservative estimates, $368 million were being lost through productivity losses in our workplaces every year as a result of domestic violence, and that is the most conservative estimations of that, and that that would add up to around $3.7 billion lost to our economy through loss of productivity and staff turnover through domestic violence over a 10-year period. And if policies were put in place, we would have the potential to save lives and to increase productivity and improve the bottom line for our businesses. Now, to me, that ultimately is what we want our health and safety legislation to be about. It's about protecting everyone in the workplace, and it's also about raising that bottom level of expectation for employers so that we know and that we ensure and support our employers to be doing the best by everyone in the workplace so that they can be as happy and as productive as possible. And when we know that we're losing a lot to our economy through domestic violence, and we're losing lives as well, and that we have an opportunity for intervention that would also save us money from the increased welfare benefits, where overseas evidence has shown that 70% of women on sole parent benefits are likely to be leaving violent relationships. This is an absolute possibility for a win-win-win intervention where we can help the government's lines, we can save lives, and we can improve business productivity. So I am advocating very strongly for the ACC Workplace Injury Prevention Action Plan to be negotiated with WorkSafe to include a plan for training for businesses around the country. I've had the discussion with Business New Zealand about this, and they've said that businesses are really keen to intervene and support staff around domestic violence. They recognise domestic violence as a workplace hazard. Unfortunately, they're not supporting my bill in relation to putting in those workplace protections, and they saw it as a bit nanny state, but they weren't adverse to the government providing through ACC support for businesses to help them actually intervene and do what's right, because many employers overestimate the risk. They underestimate the prevalence of violence and the impact on their staff. Mr. Chair.
Jan Logie.
Thank you. But they overestimate the risk of, if somebody is experiencing violence, what the risk of that may be in the workplace. And some, mostly women, but possibly men as well, are losing their jobs because of that lack of knowledge and the lack of clear policies and supports for that. I know that the Ministry of Social Development has developed a range of resources, including mock-ups of policies, posters to go in workplace. So a lot of work has been done, but it's not happening. It's not being rolled out through the country. Most employers wouldn't have a clue that actually under existing legislation, domestic violence is a hazard. I don't know if anyone in this House would have experienced a workplace where, when you did your hazard identification, that domestic violence was mentioned within that. I've never experienced it, even though I have been in a workplace where colleagues have been experiencing domestic violence, and I've certainly seen how much of my time, as well as other colleagues, as well as the colleague who was experiencing the violence, time was taken up dealing with it. And we did put accommodations in place, but that was only based on our knowledge. There was no, and that was luck. And in many other places, people haven't had the experiences that we did to be able to intervene and provide those supports. So it is absolutely vital and of huge benefit for us to be able to get those plans in place and roll out that training, because business have said pretty much that they're not going to do it themselves, and that information is not getting out there. So that clearly indicates to me the need for a government plan, because it's here in the legislation, but if nobody knows about it, then what good is it? Very little, I would suggest. Thank you.